Well, joining me in the studio now to discuss this in more detail is a security analyst at Temitope Olodo and Douglas Pollyn from the Association of African-Owned Businesses here in London. So as Francis was just saying there, the scope potentially for ethnic violence and factional violence within the country, is that a real possibility here?
There is a possibility for it. I think the good news for now is the intervention of the African Union, who has actually come in, and the fact that there is that international awareness. So we know that some of these leaders could be checkmate in terms of them trying to stir it up, because we know that these two individuals who are the key actors are from different ethnic groups. So the possibility of them divided the country along that line in terms of if the president is not stepping back and the coup is still deemed as being active, then we have a serious problem in our hands. But the African Union intervention will mean that the African Union might be sending a peace convoy to try and speak to both parties and see how those issues could be resolved.
Sure. And do you think that would take a lot of time, I imagine? So how would that affect the country's standing in terms of global business and the way it does its sort of, I guess, diplomacy on the world stage, Douglas? What do you think?
I mean, it's really important to mention that because this is one of the poorest countries in the world. I mean, it's really sad to see this unfortunate situation play out, because I would imagine what you should spend time doing now is to build confidence. And I mean, conflict is never good for business, absolutely not, except you're an arms dealer, which, I mean, I don't know how. Yeah, but I think the intervention of the African Union at this point is very good. I mean, I commend how quickly they've responded, and I'm hoping to see a follow-up with action just to curb the violence as soon as possible. And
President Nkurunziza, should he return to the country to rule again soon, do you think he's got a sort of legitimate right to be able to do that with the amount of, I guess you could say, uprising within the country?
I think that's one of the reasons why he wanted to be on ground as quickly as possible, because the longer he stays away, the longer power escapes him. And the next 24 hours will be quite crucial, because there are lots of factors that will be into play. A lot of people will be shifting allegiance, and we know that the groups responsible for the coup d'etat, are not stepping backwards. They want, to hold that place, and they're looking at using armor tanks and things like that to bust in and take control of certain places. So the next 24 hours will be crucial, and we don't know where he is now. He might actually be in the country secretly, but of course they have to be very careful about revealing his location, because we don't know who is with him and who is not with him at the moment.
That's a really good point you make there, actually, about where he is in the country or in a neighbouring country. Sadly, we've seen coups like this in this part of Africa before, so are there lessons to be learned from what we've seen in the past for how sort of diplomacy has been handled with these alleged coups?
I think the biggest lesson will be don't do coups. I mean, Africa has a bad history with events like this. I mean, that's what set Africa back. You prefer the worst democratic government over the best military government any day, because the rules of play are different. So I think the idea of using a coup to bring in legitimacy is a very bad idea, to be honest, because we've seen it time and time again. The military leader goes in, and then they just, once they taste power, I mean, they love it, and they're not going anywhere. And
where do you think this leaves Burundi in terms of its, I guess you could say, standing within the world? Because we know about the poverty and the hunger issues that affect the country, but now we've got this political turmoil that is taking place right now. Is it seen as maybe a pariah state across the continent?
Not really. I won't view it from that perspective. You will notice that when coups, take place, a lot of African countries, maybe not African countries, maybe international countries come out to condemn it. In this situation, we've not had much condemning, because the president actually had created this situation. He created this situation. There was no reason, and this is something that most African country leaders need to learn. There is no need for you to stay there for life. You've spent you have 2 terms. There's no need. You need to move on. And I think this is the reason why many people are being a bit quiet and just watching the scene to see how it will play out. And I think what is important and what we need to bear in mind is the fact that majority, and I'll say 90% of the people are actually in support of this school. And the reason being that they believe that this individual has lost legitimacy, and I mean the president. And because of that, the bloodshed, the kind of bloodshed that would have happened is not happening. And that's the reason why this is good. And that's the reason why it might not actually turn into an ethnic kind of cleansing situation. And I think that's the reason why in the intervention of the United Nations, I'm trying to find a soft blow or a way to get this man out of the way so that democracy could come back is what we should be looking at now.
Temi, Douglas, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you, Gavin.
Well, joining me again in the studio is the security analyst Temitope Olodo and Douglas Pollyn from the Association of African-Owned Businesses here in London. So half the nation's children, infants, affected by malnutrition. This report really is quite shocking, isn't it? How has it got this bad?
It's a long story, and I think it's a lesson for Africans generally that then everybody needs to put their house in order. I think we should not have stayed or waited to this time for us to be reviewing this issue, especially when you have over close to 82,000 youth dying, as a result of malnutrition. This is an issue that need to be reviewed, and I think there's a lot of challenges there from an economic perspective, so other cultural issues that need to be addressed, and this is really a sad story coming out from the World Food Programme.
So costing the country $600 million, as Temi alluded to just there, Douglas. I mean, how can the government get control of this situation and stop the loss?
I think it's this is a result of a culture of neglecting human capital that's gone on for several decades. And I think this should be an eye-opener for them, because for this report should have been done probably 10 or 20 years ago. It's quite sad it's coming now. I mean, you shouldn't wait for nearly 100,000 people to die before you realize it's a serious problem. One death is enough to have caused a change to happen. It's costing them almost $1 billion now, and I hope that's strong enough incentive for them to actually look at developing, like helping their people live better lives. I think that's what they need to do now.
Yeah.
Focus on Malawians, help Malawians. Not just investment in buildings is good. Bringing foreign investors is good as well. But I think they need to look inwards, help their people live a much better life. This is a country that is projected to have 6.2% growth in 2015.
Yeah,
that's phenomenal growth. That should reflect on every level of society. This shouldn't happen. It's quite unfortunate.
And those figures for growth, they're staggering, as you say just there. So when it comes to what the government can actually do and how health experts can help, is it more of an educational angle that they need to take? Because nutrition and ploughing money into the country, that's all well and good, but when it runs out, and there's not necessarily a sustainable program in place for the country to develop.
We know for now that there is a program in place to help school children in terms of feeding them, giving them porridge and things like that. And that is just one innovative way of ensuring that there is that nutrition. But I think they need to look inward and more within Africa, because we know that internal trading within Africa currently stands at about 12%. So within Africa itself, there is a lot that could be done, even by the African diasporas with more taking investment into that place. Is a cultural kind of environment or a cultural kind of environment, but there's a lot that could be done, and a lot of new crops or new kind of investment that could come out from that agricultural environment.
Absolutely. And what other partnerships do you think the Malawian government could undertake, Douglas, when it comes to sort of partnering with NGOs and charity groups, particularly in terms of distributing food?
But it's great to see the World Food Programme taking kind of the lead on this. I think the way out of this is investment. Maybe investment in human capital. Malawians have to be taught how to feed themselves. That's what needs to happen. I mean, you can pump in a lot of money into this country, roll out fancy programs, but if the people don't know how to take care of themselves, you'll be wasting a lot of money. So I think education is very, very, very important. You've got to go in there, educate people, teach them innovative ways of farming, probably like subsistence farming, where they don't depend on like the bigger organizations to help them, they can actually fend for themselves. I think that's long term. That's what should be focused on, and just teach them how to fish. Basically, I mean that's what it needs to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When we're talking about this now, obviously, Temi, after this report's been released, but we've known about the issues for quite a long time. But how difficult is it for an issue like this to come up onto the radar? Because we've seen, so much to do with conflict in Africa. Burundi right now, for example, the Central African Republic is going through a lot of violence right now too. Does it take another famine on the scale of Ethiopia for the world to sit up and take note and help it?
I think you're right. You brought up very important issues because these are countries that on a yearly basis are releasing their budget in terms of what they want to do, and I think this is where we all we all have responsibility to say, what, you are neglecting this area or those particular area, and what they need now is more of a food security agenda to say, for the next 10 years, this is how we intend to move from where we are now to where we want to be. And then, people seeing that will be able to know how to chip into it, because we're talking about this now, but we don't know how, for example, the African diasporas that have interest in helping in this area might be able to inject, some that skill set into it, and how Africa in general could come together in terms of African Union, the African World Bank, and how they could get, the African Development Bank could get involved. So those are all the different strong institutions that could actually move into that environment and actually help to ensure that we avoid the kind of disaster that happened in Ethiopia and other countries around.
Very interesting points you raised there, Temi. Thank you very much, and to Douglas as well. Much appreciated.